From the PEP Radio Newsroom, these are the stories we are covering at this hour. On the campaign trail, President Donald Trump promised to roll back LGBTQ plus protections, and within his first few days in office, he has already begun to fulfill some of those promises. Trump issued two executive orders pertaining to these protections, one stating that the United States will only recognize two sexes, male and female, that are unchangeable, and another ending federal diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. The executive order, recognizing only two sexes, ended the Biden administration's effort to extend Title IX regulations to include gender identity and sexual orientation. Biden's Title IX regulations went into effect at many colleges and universities across the country in August, though not at the University of Pittsburgh. Lawsuits from several states and three conservative organizations led to a federal judge blocking the education department from enforcing these regulations in affected states and institutions attended by members of the conservative organizations. Because a student from Female Athletes United, one of the groups participating in the lawsuit, attends the university, Pitt was included in the injunction, according to Vanessa Love, Director of Civil Rights and Title IX in Pitt's Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. The regulations were struck down in court in January. Nikki Ripley, head of legal services at the Hugh Lane Wellness Foundation, said that though the repeal of Title IX regulations are harmful, it's not out of left field. It's historically the norm, and I'm not saying we shouldn't hope for better, but that's something we're sort of used to dealing with, whereas something like the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act, that reasoning is just flat out saying trans women can't compete with cis women or girls, Ripley said. In the 2020 Bostock ruling, the U.S. Supreme Court determined that anti-LGBTQ discrimination violates federal law because discriminating against someone based on gender identity or sexuality in the workplace is discriminating against them based on sex under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Biden issued an executive order that directed federal agencies to use the Bostock decision and its definition of sex across all laws, prohibiting discrimination based on sex, which Trump recently withdrew. According to Ripley, there should be a strong case to argue that discrimination against people on the basis of gender identity and sexual orientation is inherently sex-based as it applies to Title IX because of the win with Bostock. However, the holding in Dobbs about abortion really showed us that we can't ignore the influence of politics and political appointments on traditional legal wisdom and reasoning, Ripley said. Ripley described the government's definition of sex as the realistic legal thing that could change, though they described some of the administration's other efforts as taking bold swings. The Trump administration doesn't seem terribly concerned with what is considered conventionally legal in this space. Like they're going to take big swings, and then if things get challenged, they get challenged, Ripley said. As far as defense of LGBTQ plus rights, Ripley said they are not terribly optimistic about allies in Congress holding ground and expressed concern with courts ruling based on politics more than precedent. While organizations like the ACLU will be safeguarding rights on a legal and national level, Ripley said they see a lot of advocacy spaces turning efforts towards investing in state and local protections. Governor Josh Shapiro said recently that he met with cannabis dispensary owners from Maryland, Ohio, New Jersey, and New York. He wanted to ask them how many of their customers at stores near the Pennsylvania border were crossing state lines to buy their products. Their response, he said, over 60%. Pennsylvanians are buying cannabis, but now what's happening is they're paying taxes in other states, Shapiro said. We need to change that. We need to be more competitive. It wasn't the first time Shapiro has come out in favor of legalizing recreational adult use cannabis. He advocated for it in his budget address last year. Still, despite some legislative efforts, no legalization bill made substantive progress in the legislature, though public polling, albeit paid for by a pro-cannabis advocacy group, shows broad support for legalization. But Shapiro and other advocates believe that new legislative session that just started this month could be different. For starters, state spending increases supported by Shapiro and other Democrats in the last budget are projected to shrink the state's surplus funds, and no one wants to raise taxes to fill that gap. Advocates are hoping that will be incentive enough for Republicans in the state Senate, where they have a majority, to more seriously consider passing a recreational cannabis bill. Kate Flessner, a spokesman for Senate Majority Leader Joe Pittman, said this issue is multifaceted and proposals would need to be first vetted by standing committees before advancing further and receiving input by each of our members. It's not a no. At least one Senate Republican has signaled strong support for recreational cannabis. House Democrats have generally been more friendly to recreational cannabis legalization, though their bills gained little traction in the chamber last year. Democrats had a one-seat majority in the House until the death of an Allegheny County representative this month, but a special election in the heavily Democratic district will be in March. But getting the support for legalization in principle may not be the biggest roadblock to passing recreational cannabis legislation. To craft a bill that could pass in a divided legislature, state leaders must address concerns about how it would impact public health, social equity, criminal justice, industry, and the state coffers. And many lawmakers and constituencies have different ideas about how to prioritize those. To learn more about this story and all the stories that we cover, check out the PEP Radio page on the Pennsylvania Equality Project website, paequality.com. Be sure to download the Live 365 app to take PEP Radio with you wherever you go. That's the news at this hour. Now let's get back to more music on PEP Radio.